All right, so it is 4:02, and I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. To start, we do need to select a chairperson. Last year, it was Jeremy. He did a great job. The start of new year, we need to select a new chairperson. So would anybody like to nominate a chairperson for this year?
Well, if Jeremy did a great job last year, can he be it this year too?
You know, that's an easy fallback. I'm happy to do it. I don't have my crib notes on me, Amy. If you want me to do any more work on that, you might have to walk me through the actual Robert's Rules of Order.
Yes, I can do that for you. And then I can provide them for you for the next meeting.
Okay.
You, Jeremy.
All right, do I hear a motion to approve Jeremy as the chairperson?
Well, I'll second that, I guess.
I'm sorry, Laura, did you make a motion?
I think Daryl made the motion.
Daryl made the motion.
Oh, okay, I apologize. Okay, and Greg, you seconded?
Mhm.
Wonderful. All right, well, Jeremy, I'll pass it off to you. It might be good to do, since we do have a new face here, to do a quick round of introductions. I'm sorry, I did not do that before we kicked it off.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first, introduce myself, and then kind of, I guess, point to the next person as we typically do on Zoom, I guess. Jeremy Hull, born and raised in Hood River. Practiced law up there. Actually just took a job back at my old employer in Portland area at Nike. So possibly my last year on the budget committee, but happy to work with everybody.
Wonderful.
And I'll look to Cindy. I think I recognize Cindy from the past, so I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm Cindy Walbridge. Brand new to the budget committee, and I was the planning director of the city of Hood River for 28 years. So lots of budget experience.
Good.
That's it.
Oh, I'm Laura Dunn. I'm the chair of the regular part of the board.
Oh, are we introducing ourselves? I'm Daryl Roberts. I'm the secretary treasurer of the board.
And I'm Greg Pack. I'm just a board member, but also the general manager of Mount Hood Meadows and Cooper Spur Resort, and do a lot of budgeting for sure. My whole day has been spent in meetings, actually doing our planning sessions wrapped around that entire thing. So.
And I think Bridget might have just joined. Bridget, is that you?
Nope, it's Ty.
Oh, hey, Ty. Just kidding.
Yep.
Well, Ty, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So my name is Ty Graves, and I am the operations manager at Columbia Area Transit.
All right, Tia?
Hi, my name is Tia Mayhew, and I am the office manager at Columbia Area Transit.
And Patty?
Yeah, and my name is Patty Fink, and I'm, for some reason, my camera was just working and now it's not, so I apologize for that. But I am the outgoing executive director, and my last day is June 17th. So there you have it.
Yep. And then I am Amy Schlappe. I am the incoming executive director. I have worked for CAT for the past couple of years as the planning and development manager and was recently promoted. All right. So Jeremy, oh, thank you. So I think we can move on to item number 3.
All right. Do you need anything from me on that, or is that you?
That'll be me.
Perfect.
All right, so go ahead and reading of the budget for fiscal year 2022-23. I did send it in the materials, so I'm not going to read it word for word, but I am going to go through it. And it looks like Bridget is joining us as well. So we'll allow her to introduce herself real quick. Hi, Bridget.
Hi there.
Chris. All right, you joined just in time. I was just about to start reading the budget message, but if you just want to introduce yourself real quick before we do that.
Hi, my name is Bridget Bailey, and I have served as a director for the Transportation District in the past. And I live in Hood River and ready for the meeting. I'm on my horse right now, so I'll be getting off and then I'll get to my computer screen. So there'll be a little blip, but I'm listening to every word.
Awesome, thank you. I think that is the first time that I've heard that.
That's a new one on Zoom.
That's a
I can
first.
hear the
Here
clip.
she is. I
I
don't
can
know.
hear
I'll
the
put
clip
camera.
flop of the hooves.
This is her. I don't know if there's a camera on for me, but my horse is right here. She's very good.
We can hear her.
We'll have to make sure that at some point we have a bridle path somewhere in the system.
Okay. All right. So, wanted to first go over the accomplishments of our fiscal year 2022. We had a very eventful year this year, and we accomplished a lot. And Patty really is going out with a bang, so to speak. So the key things that we accomplished: our Hood River City route, which is the fixed route that goes within Hood River downtown and up to the Heights and also over to Walmart. We added evening service and weekend service, and we made the weekend service year round, which was a big step for us. I was promoted to the executive director position. Our 4-agency Gorge Pass was launched in July 2021. So the Gorge Pass system, which is a handy little transit fare pass, which we started in February of 2020. We expanded it to include the Link Transit System, Mount Adams Transportation Services, and Skamania County Transit in July 2021. So made it so people can go within the gorge and travel on 4 different providers with one little pass. We contracted with Skamania County Transit to provide the Dog Mountain Shuttle for the 2nd year. So making it their car-free option for people to do the Dog Mountain Trail. We provided the Gorge to Mountain service in-house, reducing overall costs. So allowing access for folks to Mount Hood Meadows and Government Camp from Hood River. We implemented the Gorge Transit Connect, a low-income pass program. So that's where we provided low-income passes to local partner organizations who actually distributed the passes for us to eligible clients. And that was a huge success and very popular. We continue to support local community efforts with our different partners. So with Hood River County Health, One Community Health, the Next Door, emergency services, etc., to ensure residents have access to COVID testing and vaccinations, as well as other social service needs. We secured over $500,000 in capital grant funds for an additional 2 electric vehicles and another $500,000 for a summer expansion of the Columbia Gorge Express to Cascade Locks. So that would stop at Multnomah Falls, from Portland, Troutdale, Multnomah Falls, and Cascade Locks. And this is in addition to our normal Columbia Gorge Express service. So it allows for even easier access to the falls and reduction of traffic congestion and safety issues at the falls. We began implementation of the 2017 Transit Master Plan, including significant public engagement to understand how the district should grow in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's been a super exciting process, and I really have been enjoying seeing all the engagement that we've been receiving from our community, both in surveys, but also in the form of our Citizens Advisory Committee. Okay, so COVID has continued to just make things problematic. This week, I think or a couple of weeks is a primary example of myself, the operations manager, and the office manager all getting COVID in one fell swoop. even though we're all following the different guidelines, and really being adaptive to the different things that throws our way. We did have masking requirements on public transit, but that did end, as I'm sure we're all aware. And so it's really kind of been a juggling act of making our riders and our staff feel comfortable riding the bus, as well as following all the different guidelines as they change. So for the 2023 fiscal year budget, there's a couple of different goals that have been outlined for the board. We want to complete the formal update to the Transit Master Plan, as that's my key guiding document as I take the reins for the organization. Continue and grow the multi-provider Gorge Pass program and support the regional transit strategy and work towards improved connectivity throughout the Gorge. Identify and secure opportunities for staff training in human resources, leadership, and overall transit operations training. This is a kind of a passion project for me. I have seen of the amazing things that having access to the additional training can do for staff and professional development. Renovate the CAT office to accommodate growing staff and support expansion of services. Our building was created back when we only did dial-a-ride services, and it's not super functional for what we need. And until we can grow into a facility or find a facility that we can build, depending on what we hear back from the Transit Master Plan, there are some changes that could be done to make the facility work for staff as we continue to grow and expand. Secure funding to maintain existing services and implement service expansion prioritized in the Transit Master Plan. There are, the responses we've seen so far, there are some short-term things that we can implement that help support the long-term vision of the Transit Master Plan. However, in order to do that, we just need to make sure we have proper funding and it's sustainable. Expand outreach to vulnerable communities, i.e. Latino, Native American, seniors, individuals with disabilities, etc., to ensure access and awareness of transit. This is something that I think has really, that we've expanded since COVID started. It just kind of made it easier with all the access to different social services. And we want to continue to work with our different partners to engage with those vulnerable communities. We do work with MCHED to fund a travel trainer position. Her name, the person in that position, her name is Sarah. She's wonderful. She's a go-getter, and she's been the person who's managing the Gorge Transit Connect program, which is something that I started and I passed off on to her. And additionally, we want to continue to explore innovative options and implement solutions to address specific transportation needs. Local NEMT and door-to-through-door, after-hour hotel, bar, restaurant shuttle, and a shared bike program. We're hearing that the community wants some additional access to different types of transportation. And whereas it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to be the providers of those, we do want to see what we can do to help and to encourage those type of resources to be available to the community. And there's different ways that that can be done. Okay, so to provide an overview of our proposed budget, there are a couple of different kind of sections. There's the general budget, which is made up of federal grants, property tax revenues, state payroll tax collection, and a variety of other smaller sources.
Could I interrupt 1 second? Do you think if we have questions about your budget address, we could ask those now and then go to the numbers?
Yeah, sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, because I know Daryl said he had a bunch of questions and I have a few too, just that things I don't understand.
Yeah, so do you want to first talk about kind of the message stuff and then we'll go into the numbers?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, fire away.
Oh, okay, start now. Okay. You said you had a 2017 transit master plan. Is it not done?
So this is an update to the 2017 Transit Master Plan.
Okay, it's an update. So that's done and adopted.
Yes.
And you're working on an update now and you're gonna put it in the budget.
Uh,
Okay,
Yeah, so we've already started it. So and just to kind of dial back a little bit, so the 2017 Transit Master Plan, that was basically looking at how we could move from a dial-a-ride mostly option to fixed route type of
Mhm.
services. And Patty, when she came to the district, she got right on that, and the majority of those goals were completed, which is
Okay.
why we needed an update.
okay. And so the update is in the budget for this year, and will you need a consultant for that?
Yeah, so
the
so
money
we
for-
already, and just to clarify, we did start it. And we've done the existing conditions, the public engagement plan, and we have put a survey out into the community. And community members are taking it right now. We're also doing public outreach as well. So the next step is service alternatives and land use consultant. So we have selected a land use consultant, but the majority of their work isn't going to be starting until July. So we need to make sure there's room for them. And then also our public engagement consultant. And then Patty is going to be doing, sorry, I shouldn't say Patty. There's going to be a planning consultant as well. And
One that's really good and knows the background really well.
yes, there will be the opportunity for we will obviously follow procurement, but she has the opportunity to put her hat in the ring.
It assumes, Cindy, that I want that role too. So let's just remember I'm retiring from that agency.
Okay.
So okay.
She might not want to.
And so you hope to get that done in that budget year of 2022?
23, yeah.
23, I'm sorry, yeah. You said something in your report about to restore confidence in the system. And did something happen?
Well, the pandemic. So we found,
okay.
yep.
I thought something else big had happened and I missed it.
Well,
okay.
In most of the world, we have moved on from the pandemic, but we are still kind of seeing remnants of the pandemic affecting us. Mostly the fact that I think recently, because the mask requirements went away, I think for a lot of people, that just made them more comfortable being out in the public. And with that going away, there's still, I think, that encouragement to make people feel comfortable using transit. And, you know, as things change with the variants, it still keeps popping up. So it's something that we're continuing to make sure both riders and drivers feel comfortable.
Okay. And then you have STIF funds. What projects are the STIF funds funding?
Yeah, so STIF funds, sorry, I didn't mean to get really excited, but that's kind of those are my passions. The Hood River City Route, the Low Income Pass Program, which also includes the student passes. So we provide free passes to all Hood River County Hood River County Public School District kids for middle and high school.
Good.
It also funds our Cascade Locks local route that also provides some deviated fixed route. And then also, yes, sorry, I'm going down the list. Oh, and then also, not this past year, but this year going forward, it's going to help fund the ADA improvements to some sidewalks near our buses.
Okay, thanks. That was it. I just didn't understand those three things when I read your presentation originally. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions.
Amy, on the if we're going to discuss topics on the message, a couple of questions I have. One is the renovation of the CAT office. Is that at what scale is that happening?
So we've reserved about $70,000 for that. And I'm hoping that's high. But we kind of did it a little high just because labor and construction and everything is just a little expensive. The goal with that is to ensure that there would be, and we haven't hired a professional to really help us design the space yet. But right now there is only just one office. So that's the office that I am now using. However, it's a large office and I don't need that much room. And it would be really good to have Ty, the operations manager, to be able to have an office where he can, do sensitive discussions, or just some of his work just needs to not be in an open room, which is where he is now. And the same goes for Tia, who's our office manager. She is kind of in a corner, but it's a really weird little corner. And it also, she deals with all of our HR, all of our accounting, and our payroll and sensitive data. And it's probably not the most appropriate space for her to be dealing with that type of stuff. And then also the way that it's laid out right now, it's just kind of a funky, it's open, but it doesn't allow for us to really kind of easily add staff into that space. And as we're looking to kind of make sure we have the right supportive staff for the amount of service that we have on the road, it's hard to fit that amount of people in that space. And the dispatching area, which is also kind of the front desk customer service area, right now, the way that it's laid out, their backs are actually towards as people walk in. So again, their screens are really visible. And I think there's probably some really easy fixes to how we can kind of change that space to make it more sense. So we're actually welcoming people who come into the office, but also not displaying all of our different information to the public.
So you said $70,000. This is not there was no one or other number in front of that. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So this is a somewhat small scale expansion or alteration. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Really the intention just to make it flow a little better, but nothing hugely significant.
Jeremy, I'm just going to add, this is Patty, just going to add to that part of the reason that we are thinking small is because we think one of the issues that are come out of the transit master plan is whether the current location where we have our facility is will allow us to expand the way we'd like to. And since we don't exactly know what whether the transit master plan will say, yes, we want you to expand, or no, you should, stay as you are. We're trying to decide, we want to make this building work for as long as we need to, but if we do need to move, we don't want to spend so much money that,
Right.
it will make it harder for us to move. So that's part of the thought process there as well.
Cool.
All right. Any kind of additional questions about that? Okay, I think the other thing too that I did want to point out too is that with this budget, we're trying to be very conservative with our fuel costs and our preventive maintenance costs and repair as well. Just with the crisis in Ukraine that is happening and not knowing really how those fuel prices are going to fluctuate. And in addition, with the labor shortages right now, with the increase of costs for just parts in general, that also having to do with the supply chain issue, and then labor for actually doing the repairs. So we wanted to make sure we had some buffer in there. I think that's a good thing to know. All right.
Amy?
Yeah.
My questions are specific line item. It's about the numbers. Do you want to go over those later, or do you want to do that now?
So what I was thinking about doing, and I can be flexible, is I can share my screen And I did want to show everybody kind of our ridership. I did send that graph to everybody today, in case they didn't get a chance to look at it. And then I've also kind of highlighted the different changes for each different section on the LB20. And then I was thinking when we do that, then you could ask the specific questions per line item. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. All right, let me share my screen. Okay. All right, so here is to the ridership to date. It was 2017. That was when we went from a dial ride system to fixed route, and you can see that there was different dips. And then we went quite a bit. We went up, jumped up quite a bit in January 2020. And then of course there's the really sharp decrease in April and March. And then you can see that we're trending back upwards. And we've had a couple of like dips that correspond with our seasonal service, so the Gorge to Mountain Express, and then of course the summer. So I just wanted to point that out. And just again, we're working, we've been really spending the time the past couple of years building relationships with, or continuing to build upon the relationships with the City of Hood River, City of Cascade Locks, Port of Cascade Locks, Port of Hood River, Mount Hood Meadows, the Forest Service, and ODOT to encourage people to use public transit in order as a way to reduce the negative impacts of visitors coming to the area. And we really feel those partnerships, in addition to the marketing program that we're working on for the ForPass agency, is really going to help change behaviors from using private vehicles and using public transit when they come to the Gorge. And then also on the flip side of that, encouraging locals to give transit a try instead of using their private car to go to work, go to the grocery store, medical services, etc. And we really think this year is going to be a pivotal year for us and show through ridership just what that investment that we've done over the past couple of years will do. So that was the last thing that I wanted to say with that. And also to point out, so this year, we have restored our service levels to pre-pandemic levels. And we have also started doing City of Hood River evening weekend service, as well as our Falls to Locks summer route. So that's the service that we've added in addition to our Columbia Gorge Express service for the summer that allows for increased access from Portland to Multnomah Falls and Cascade Locks that we're working with ODOT on, as well as the Hood River Connector, which was our solution to make it easier for people who are coming or going to Portland. That service, so the Columbia Gorge Express, which goes from Portland, Cascade Locks, Multnomah Falls to Portland. That starts and ends at CAT, but we want to make it easy for people to get to and from the downtown. So instead of them using the city route, we have started using this connector route instead, which makes it a lot simpler for people to get to and from the downtown into CAT. So that's not a barrier for them to using the Columbia Gorge Express. Any questions on those services?
Can you explain that last part? Just, I don't understand what you mean by, or I'm not clear about what you mean by there's a connector route. Are you talking about Hood River City or Portland City?
Hood River City. So our Columbia Gorge Express, it was kind of confusing. It would go to the port when it was going one direction. So the Port of Hood River, and that's where people would get off in order to go downtown. But in order to go westbound on the Columbia Gorge Express to go back to Portland, they would have to use the Hood River City route in order to get to CAT to get onto the Columbia Gorge Express. We got a large amount of feedback that was confusing. So in order to make that a little bit more streamlined, we add the Hood River Connector service, which literally goes from CAT to the downtown to the port and then back to CAT again. And it connects with the Columbia Gorge Express times. Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So to highlight kind of the, am I still sharing? Can you guys still see my meeting materials? Okay. So let's start with revenue. Our contract revenue is a little higher because of contracting with MCED and the link. Our federal assistance is much larger due to expected delivery of vehicles. Now, these vehicles we were supposed to receive 2 years ago, but because of the COVID and the supply chain issues, those keep getting delayed. Our fingers are crossed that we will actually receive them this year. So we've included them in the budget. So, and we didn't have them in the last year's supplemental, which is what that fiscal year 2022 number is, which is why it's so much bigger.
So Amy, on that one, you
Yeah.
did last year, did you have that million or whatever it was in last year's budget and you're just carrying it over? Because we talked about these last year's, I remember too.
Yeah. So the answer, oh, Amy, go ahead if you want. Sorry.
Oh, well, I'll take a stab at it and Patty, you can jump in if I miss something. So it was on the original one, but the supplemental budget we had to remove it. And that's what this number is. This is from the supplemental budget that was approved. So that's why there's that big difference. Patty, did I get that right?
But you are correct, Jeremy, that originally in the actual, the budget committee approved, we had $949,000 in that federal assistance. And as Amy noted, we had expected those vehicles to be delivered in July of last year, and that then was delayed. We thought 6 months, and then they told us that they stopped making that, stop that production on that for the Ford Transit van altogether, because they had other lines that were more lucrative. So we're hopeful that they've got them back on production now, and we should receive them sometime this summer. That's our hope.
Thank you.
And Daryl, go ahead and jump in, and everybody else too. Just go ahead and jump in when you have questions. If you want to raise your hand, or you can just say, I have a question. So then the other thing I wanted to kind of note on this revenue piece. So we have a current allotment of CARES Act funds that is included in this 4,200 federal assistance. But we also did just apply for a new set of funds, which is this 275,000 or 275,000. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And those are to assist with some of those ongoing things that we have been impacted with COVID, and also salary wages that we've had to increase, et cetera, et cetera.
And so just also, so as you remember, we called out the the Federal CARES Act is federal dollars. We called it out specially at that point because, number one, it was allocated to us as a separate fund element, and because also we assumed that it would be disappearing. And so while we still assume that it will disappear, we still have access to, but still have the potential to access some additional dollars, and that's why we've left it in again this year.
But it just not as much as available, you think? That's why that number's gone down?
In part, that is correct. We don't know how much, we're being conservative here. We don't know how much the state will allocate to us. So we've put in a request for additional dollars. We put in a request for $500,000. We don't know, we doubt that the state will fund that fully, but this is sort of a conservative estimate of what we think they'll fund.
Okay. So does that $500,000 represent like 3 or 4 different projects, and you expect them to fund 2 of them?
Yes, it reflects basically some of the increased costs due to wages, through the increase in our union contract that probably wouldn't have been as significant had COVID not been around. Also, some of the bonuses that we've provided, as well as some preventative maintenance that has been higher than expected because of COVID and the vehicle delays, etc. So those were all things. We just don't know how much of that they'll fund. We expect them to cover what was in this year's budget as overruns. What we don't know is how much of next year's budget they're going to fund.
Okay, thank you.
And I think also the key thing to note about that too, about those funds, about those salary increases that we included in there, that is also to it's to get us through the next year until we can apply for the next round of grant funds, where we can actually include those rate increases as just our normal rate. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Any other questions on revenue?
I had two, but you answered them already, so.
Oh, yay, I love it. I'm gonna take that as a win, Daryl. All right. So let's see, I didn't actually, okay. All right, operating expense. So like I mentioned earlier, we have a large fuel expense due to the fuel shortages and making sure we have a buffer, just because it's unknown as to how long the crisis in Ukraine and the war is going to last. Let's hope that it doesn't last much longer, but we want to make sure we're prepared in case it does.
You think 10% is enough?
I second that question.
So also that 260,000 from this last year, that was from our supplemental budget that we increased it. So our original, I think was, Patty, I'm not remembering. Do you remember what our original number was?
Well, it was 240 is what it was originally. And Daryl, the reason we went up to 288 and not higher is because we expect to be right around 200 when we actually end. Based on current expenditures and pricing, we expect to be right around 200 when we end on June 30th. So we have, it looks like we added not very much, but because of where we landed, we expect it to be around $88,000 more. So it is a little bit higher than, if that makes sense.
But is that enough to cover adding the extra service to Multnomah Falls, which the cost of that aren't reflected in this year's budget because it won't even start till June, and the bulk of the expenses will be July and August for that one.
That's correct, and we have calculated that out. Amy did some fuel calculations, and we are estimating that this should be about correct. If the fuel prices do continue high into the winter, I'm sure Amy will come back to you and ask to have that increase. But at this point, we think that that's a pretty good number.
All right.
Hello, this is Bridget.
Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
Are we working on that line of operating expense, right? I was just looking at the amount for grant contract match funds. In your experience, what has been the relationship between spending more money in that category and getting a bigger result in terms of garnering grant and match funds?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
So it says 62,000 as an operating expense for grant and contract match funds. Is that 62,000 just for administering it, or does that number have a relationship to how much money you're actually able to bring in the form of a grant? Like if it was up, what would be the result?
So
getting more grants.
So Bridget, some of that is grant match that we provide to MCED as a match for some larger regional projects that they're managing. And one of them is, Amy talked about our Sarah Crook, and she is the mobility manager for the region. We pay a portion, about 10% of the overall cost of that, and she provides about 50% of service to Hood River County. And we also provide
Okay.
match for the Gorge Pass promotion, and also about 10%. And I would say that we get 80% of the benefit from that, since we are the largest provider of the Gorge Pass. So we think
Yes,
some of those.
That's great. I
yeah.
just, so that's not for marketing to, or trying to secure a grant. That's for carrying out something that is then, you're sharing staff in a way that's advantageous.
Yes, sharing staff or.
I'm just
sharing
trying to figure
regional-
out why that's in operating.
Mhm.
So can you help me understand why that's under operating rather than administrative?
So it's also for the link services that we contracted to them. So for the Dalles portion,
Okay.
our Dalles route that goes between Hood River and the Dalles.
Oh, okay. And which of the figures under your expenses has the most direct relationship to you adding more routes? Like if we could possibly have 2 more in the late evening on all your routes, where would that go?
That would go
Is it
under.
just,
Sorry, that would, Amy will talk a little bit about that under direct service personnel, because that's where the I mean, some of the cost is found in the operating expense and the administrative expense, but the bulk of the cost is found in driver wages.
Okay.
So you would
because it's a
potentially-
driver time is the bulk of it.
yes.
If you add route,
If you add additional
you.
service, yeah, it would be the.
It's about 50%. It's about, well, let's say it's about 20% administrative cost, about 40% actual cost. So like fuel and
Okay.
preventative maintenance and whatnot, and about 40%. Did I say 40%? Yeah, 40 and 40, and about 40% driver costs. So that's approximately the breakup.
okay.
All right. And then again, the preventive maintenance and the tires, that all goes under that 50/20 operation expenses line item for 125.
And so why are you expecting that operation expense to decrease next year by $35,000?
So we are hoping that we don't have to do as many repairs on the vehicles as we have had to do, because again, we're hoping to actually get the new vehicles so that we can replace some of those older vehicles. For example, one of our vehicles that was supposed to be replaced, we just learned that we have to replace the transmission in it. And if we had already gotten those vehicles, we wouldn't have had to have that expense.
Yeah, but we just added 5 new used vehicles for the Multnomah Falls service, didn't we? And those are likely to have repairs needed, I would assume, since they're used vehicles.
You just went back to last year's budgeted number, right? Because on the incremental or the other budget, we actually increased for those increased expenses that you saw.
Yeah.
The supplemental budget.
Again, we aimed high on the operating expense for this year. We expect that expense to come in right around 120. So this is just a reflection of what we experienced last year and why we expect it to be about the same as it was this year.
Does that answer that question, Daryl? Greg?
Well, it does. I'm not sure I agree with your figure, but, I guess it's hoping that new vehicles show up, which they may or may not, and adding more used vehicles to the fleet that will get heavy use this summer, and most of that will show up in next year's budget, tends to make me think that number may not be high enough. Unless everything goes really well.
Yeah, that's always the hope. But there's, if the budget committee would like to increase that buffer a little bit, you always have the opportunity to recommend that to be increased a bit. But we do feel, based off of the information that we have right now, that is a fairly accurate number. But again, of course, stuff like this can change, and then if it would, I'd have to come back to you guys and let you know and ask for a supplemental budget.
Okay.
Anything else on the operating expense? Okay. All right, so administrative expenses. So as we had talked about earlier, it's about 70,000 to renovate the office, and there's 5,000 of that also is for new chairs. We are sitting in some chairs that have seen some very good use, and there have been some reported back problems because of it, and hoping to get slightly more ergonomic chairs for staff. Also, additional expense for human resources and leadership and general operations training, as I had discussed earlier, and that would be in the other administrative expense. And then professional fees are increased due to the consultants needed to complete the transit master plan. And so again, that's the public engagement consultant, the planning consultant, and the land use consultant. Any questions on the administrative expense?
Or what's the other administrative expense increase?
So that's for the expected training for the human resources and the leadership and general operations. We're thinking that's probably a little on the high side, but wanted to make sure we had a fairly conservative amount for that.
I guess I can't say anything because I encourage you to do that in our one-on-one, I guess.
Yeah, and again, the hope is that, I mean, we have found some potentially free courses for the human resources, so we might be able to utilize that and bring the number down. All right, so administrative personnel expense. So Patty's, as the outgoing executive director, salary has been removed. However, in this, we've added the office manager, so Tia's role. And then we've also, as we are kind of growing and kind of rejiggering, as I was promoted to executive director, one of the dispatchers roles has become more administrative assistant. So we included that in the administrative personnel expense rather than in the direct service personnel expense where it was previously. And then also, again, with the intent of having Ty, the operations manager, do some more higher level kind of planning different things, more administrative tasks, then move some of his salary from the direct service over into administrative. And then, of course, we've decided not to replace my position as the planning and development manager, just because, just after reflecting, we didn't really think we needed a planning and development manager again, but thought that the resources would be better used with more operations support staff, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But basically adding a third field supervisor and an operations assistant instead of replacing my role. And I think a large amount of this, as we grow, as we really kind of find our footing, it has taken some time to kind of figure out what are the roles that we really need in order to support this agency and the services needed.
So what percentage or figure did you use for annual merit increases or anything else in there?
I believe it's 0.25. It's in our union contract. Is that correct?
No, so this year we don't have a wage increase because we already increased wages in January. So it wouldn't be until July of next year that they'd see an initial wage increase. So that just includes the step increases, no COLA.
Okay.
This is Bridget, and I would urge an increase under the direct service personnel because of the labor market.
Yeah, and we did do a big bump, and so the 352 an hourly wage increase was a large bump that happened actually this year. But that's why you see kind of well, if you had looked at the original fiscal year 2022 budget, why there was such a big bump from direct service wages.
Yeah, I would just say that $3.52 per hour doesn't sound like very much money for Hood River. So that doesn't look too big to me. I just, want you to be prepared.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't want your drivers to go somewhere else.
Yep.
Is that 352 an hourly on somebody who then ends up getting a lot of overtime? Is that why you think it's so big?
So it was from so an example. So a Class B CDL driver used to a hiring wage was $19 and I think 53 cents or around there, and then we increased it to $23.35.
And have you guys experienced much attrition
Okay.
based on wage?
So and I can let Ty answer some of that question a little more thoroughly. But one of the reasons why we made this change is by talking to the drivers and asking them what they needed. And then we got to that number. But Ty, if you want to tell a little more.
Yeah, no, I think we've definitely gotten better results with hiring new people since we've gotten the new wage. We've been more competitive, and we're now the second highest paying provider in the Gorge or Greater Gorge area.
And
In
I can mention as a side note, obviously that was negotiated in our union contract with those guys. You guys went back and forth with the board on that and informing us, and we gave you direction there. But at Mount Hood Meadows, we did the exact same thing. We had to raise our bus wages from about $16 an hour to $23.67 an hour to be able to attract Class B CDL drivers. So I think the wages reflected in there, I think, are accurate for the area and the market.
And in addition to that too, we did up our what we would input into the retirement account as well.
So all these direct service personnel are getting benefits.
The full-time ones are, yes, correct. There are some part-time in there.
How many hours do you have to work to get?
30 hours. All right. Any additional questions on that?
I have one that I missed when we were up in operating expenses, and I apologize, but
Oh
it's
no,
about-
Daryl, unacceptable.
You can't go back.
Okay,
Just
we
kidding.
won't go back.
Go for it. What was your question?
Well, the advertising and marketing expense, I know we had a huge increase this year. Still not quite clear on why all that was, but you're not anticipating any increase in that for next year?
Yeah, so part of the increase from last year too is because I was on maternity leave. And so Patty did utilize some consultants who are in that advertising and marketing spot to help support Oh, Bridget is back, is she?
Yes,
Okay.
I remember that was the explanation we got for why it went up so much, but you don't, you think, is that going to be necessary again next year too?
No, that won't be necessary, but the reason why it's up this year is because of our transit master plan. So just finalizing those and then making sure we have some funds to provide for additional marketing expenses for finishing up the transit master plan. So we're going to be doing another survey that provides the different service alternatives so that people can select it. Also, just the cost for actually compiling the document and using a professional in order to do that, that'll also be in there as well. And then just ensuring that we have enough funds to do any other outreach events that we need to do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we good on that?
I am, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go back down. All right, so for direct service personnel, and then again, I did want to kind of explain more about the operations assistant and the field supervisor. So right now we only have 2 field supervisors and then 1 operations manager. And we have service out on the road 7 days a week from about 5:40 in the morning to about 8 at night. And the idea with adding this, the 3rd field supervisor is so that in general, we have a field supervisor who is working the majority of the time that we have service on the road in order to respond to accidents, be on call, and answer questions for drivers and make sure we have that support for drivers in general. It also, as I was kind of talking before, you know, with COVID and just with the way that things are changing, we really do need to be adaptable and flexible. And having only 2 field supervisors kind of really straps us thin when unexpected events do happen. And so what was happening a lot before I went on maternity leave or what have you is that I would be doing a lot of operations work and, you know, Patty would be doing some, and so would the office manager. So having this 3rd person would help reduce the amount of times that we have to ask administrative personnel to be doing more operations related things and allow them to actually do their focused work, which is more than enough to keep their hands full. Also for the operations assistant, so that's a weekend role. So they'll be doing dispatch as well as doing fleet related tasks for the field supervisors. So whether that is running up vehicles on the weekend to Point S to get tires changed, do light maintenance work, or if we're short a driver because they're out sick, then we can, you know, have this operations assistant drive the vehicle. So it just allows us to be flexible as needs change, adapt as different incidents happen, and make sure that we have service available on the road. And we're working like a well-oiled machine. Any questions on that? Okay. Ty or Patty, anything else you'd like to add on that piece?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Good.
Okay. Patty?
No, I also think if there are no questions, I think you've probably covered it quite well.
Okay. All right, so for our capital outlay, so this is where we've included a one-time cost of $200,000 for ADA sidewalk improvements. This is something that was identified in our statewide transportation improvement fund plan to make it easier for people who might have disabilities or to access the bus stops. As you may or may not know, Hood River can be very difficult to walk around because the sidewalks are not, the infrastructure is not always up to current code. So the hope is to first help or to address the bus stop at our location, and then work with the city to see where else it might make sense for us to help with sidewalk improvements.
I'm interested to know the regulatory framework around this. Is this something that we're doing out of, and it's the right thing to do, but is this out of, we see the need, or is there a state, federal, city requirement to do so? And then the second part of that question, is there a direct funding source that might be available?
Yeah, so it comes directly from our STIF funds. So through the STIF plan process, we work with a STIF committee. So a bunch of folks who either are or work with.
Sorry, Amy, you might just want to clarify what STIF is. It's the State Transportation Improvement Fund that we get through payroll tax from the state.
Yeah, and it's as part of that, we are required to have a committee who actually decides where those funds go. And one of the things that they highlighted is making it easier for people with mobility issues in order to get to our bus stops. So we deemed it acceptable, appropriate through that framework. We're not just going to go willy-nilly, say, oh, we're going to improve this sidewalk. It needs to have a direct correlation to like one of our bigger hubs or one of our larger sidewalks. Or sorry, not larger sidewalks, larger bus stops. Like the one at the CAT office. Right now it's not, there are definitely some improvements that could be made to make it easier to access. Okay, any other questions on that, Jeremy?
Nope.
Okay. So the other thing that we did not include on here for the capital outlay that Patty and I, upon some reflection, would like the budget committee to consider, and you don't have to, this is just something to consider. We, right now, when we are taking ridership, it's a fairly manual process, and we've tried to automate it as much as possible, but it's still not a perfect solution. So one way to improve that would be to do automated passenger counters, but they are very expensive. So in order to do that, it would be about $100,000 for all our different vehicles. But it would make it so the passenger counts would be all 100% accurate, and we would know that the counts were accurate for when we're going for more funding. Patty, you want to add to that?
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Just what percentage of our riders are using passes as opposed to cash?
You know, I'm not sure I know that. Patty or Ty, do you by chance have an estimated guess?
Laura, I can't give you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all yours.
I was going to say, I do not know the current statistics. About a year ago, we were pretty like 75-25 with passes, but that could have changed entirely by now.
So passes were prevalent then? Is that what you're saying? Or
Passes
cash?
were more
More
prevalent, but
Okay.
that was like across everything, and that's a high percentage of our repeat users are obviously the pass users.
Yeah.
So
So,
that may skew that number.
that's pretty much what I thought. So when a rider uses a pass, they scan in, right, when they enter the bus. So we do should have a good count of how many riders are using passes.
So they can either use a RFID pass or they can use a pass on their phone digitally. The one on their phone, they can either allow or not allow location services, which then we only get a varying amount of information. So while yes, that is correct, it just comes from a bunch of different sources, and it's not necessarily 100% accurate.
So the the phone passes and the card passes don't scan in on the bus in the same way.
They're two different providers. So the physical passes are RFID cards that
Okay,
the rider
Okay, I
has to
can
walk up
see
and
how
physically
that's-
scan, and the
I can see how that's difficult to pull that all together. Okay,
So Laura, we are doing a fair demo this summer on the Columbia Gorge Express and the shuttle, the Falls to Lock shuttle program, where we will have more fair electronics, so that potentially in this case, we would be allowed to use credit cards, but also potentially long-term, you could have all of your both your online piece, as well as your card, as well as credit card, etc., all be counted as a pass element through that, not unlike what TriMet does on their system. So it is a potential to acquire a good chunk of that information from a integrated fare program that would allow for that. And that is something that we're demoing this summer. And that may be a way to go, but that also has costs in terms of getting it on all of our buses. So there is a cost to enhance the technology, and I think that was sort of more what Amy was alluding to, is that we'd like to think about having about $100,000 in the budget as a one-time way to help address that particular technology issue. And we actually think that we may be able to save staff time and maybe even potentially reduce the amount of office staff that's required to do that. As I think I've mentioned in previous years, it is cumbersome when we take cash. There's a level of a whole requirement in terms of counting the cash and getting it to the bank, and all sorts of ways that cash can go missing as well. So that is the whole fare program is something I think the board, and this was one of the things that I was going to talk about it as I have my last board meeting with you all, that there are some areas where I think the board may want to take some initiative to think through both their fare policy and what they want to do with that, and just generally making sure that we have accurate ridership data, because ultimately how we get grant funds is really going to be dependent on how well we're doing ridership wise.
This is Bridget. So can you give me a quick example of the relationship between calculating 100 riders and what it would mean for getting additional funding?
Well, I think long-term, we have convinced the state to give us a large amount of funding for the I-84 corridor. And if we can't show we were certainly on a trend upward when COVID hit, and then went straight down in terms of ridership on the CGE. And if we can't show that we're back to a steady increase, I think the state will be less likely to feel like it's viable for them to continue to fund that service, even as necessary as it may be. So that's why we've put so much energy and effort into promoting the Gorge Pass and promoting the transit services to Multnomah Falls this summer, because we really do need to make our stand here and making sure that folks are riding and there is value both for our residents as well as those in the Portland metro area for this service. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, I just remember when I've learned how to use public transit, I just remember fareless situations. So I don't know how to get people from rural Oregon to take the bus, but I'm trying to think of everything. I guess I'd be interested in the cost of giving everybody a free pass who will use the pass to get into the airport or something like this. Because I think once they get over the hurdle of how to even get to the station and how to get where to park your car, I don't know. I just think that it's such a fabulous service, and I guess the biggest complaint I have is it doesn't go late enough at night, so I can't use it. But I think it's also a hurdle, and it would be a kind thing to our taxpayers if we have and if we're over budget somewhere in here, that it's somewhere, some point during the year, we could, give everybody a free pass that's paying taxes. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, once they ride it, they're going to love it. That's my opinion. But how to get them there, I don't know. I even getting my sister to ride it is failed. So anyway, just saying.
Yeah, I think the whole fare free thing is something that the board may want to discuss moving forward. I think certainly within the city, if there are some opportunities for us to have maybe free fares for residents within the county of Hood River, and then making sure that others pay their fair share. I just think it's a larger, broader question for the board, probably not something well decided in the budget committee. You certainly could make a recommendation to the board to consider that, but it isn't something I would place a lot of energy and effort into right now.
Do you get more counts? I gotta get out of the wind here. Do you get more counts for the funding if it's a certain type of rider or a certain route other than I-84?
No. I mean, we get funding. There are certainly formula funds that are, they estimate our, for instance, this is probably more information than you want to know, but they provide our 5311 based on a formula, which is based on the number of miles that we do and the number of riders that we have. So the more riders we have, the more revenue we receive, the more miles we travel, the more revenues we receive out of that particular fund base. And
okay, thanks.
Special Transportation Fund also has a formula related piece to it. I don't know all the pieces that are associated with it, but it has to do with the number of elderly and disabled folks that are riding the system. So everything, yes, there are some state funds or funding sources that are dependent on ridership and who we carry and et cetera, et cetera.
For the majority.
Okay, well, if I can get a little more information on, the actual relationship between accurate calculation of ridership and increased funding potential, I urge that we add the 100,000.
I guess my question would be, I know you mentioned, Patty, there's probably some savings in that, or Amy, maybe you have more details, but it'd be good to know what the ROI on it is. I mean, is it more of a convenience thing? $100,000 is nothing to, just quickly add in there. We're hand counting things and we think, hey, we're going to save this much staff time, or be rededicated. That makes sense, but I know when I look at projects, I'm like, it pays for itself in 3 to 4 to 5 years. I'm pretty good with it. If it doesn't, is it worth the inconvenience? I doubt, this is going to save us $30,000 a year for $100,000 cost. So I would ask that, what do you think the true savings are by going to this, and the true upside by getting good, accurate counts that we may be missing?
Yeah, and I think that's information we can probably give a fairly good estimate for the next meeting. I can say that fairly conservative to say that we are undercounting the amount of riders that we have right now, just with the, human error. So
How many
I,
do you think we're undercounting? How
I'm
many
not
do you
sure.
think we're undercounting?
I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying that. And Patty or Ty,
Okay, and why do you think we're undercounting?
just,
Why do you think we're undercounting?
because the majority of the counts that we get when people come on, it's up to the driver to write down the tally, but also to hit on their iPads when we have
Oh.
somebody. And it's,
Oh, geez.
it's very easy to, be like, not necessarily, or not that they wouldn't be paying attention, but I think it's fairly easy to accidentally miss people here and there. And after a while, that adds up. And I think all our drivers are doing their best to make sure that they do it. And we are encouraging them every time we see them to make sure the ridership counts are accurate.
Yeah.
But, it
Thank you for
happens.
that information, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that when I walked on with my card, that it went into some thing that Ty set up and went into the account. Didn't know the driver had to do something.
Yeah.
See, I think a lot of Ty, I know he can figure this out. I just want people to walk in the door and it goes in the count.
Yeah, and there's, some of them, when you put your rider or your pass up, it does count it. But then there's those who are don't have cash, and so it's it's just you kind of have to collate a lot of different information sources and to make sure we're getting the accurate count.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And can you remind me again the difference between how I get counted if I get onto the bus with my card versus forget my card?
So if you forget your card and you have to pay cash, then, it's so that either way, the driver is going to record the amount of passengers that get on the bus. But then we also record, how much cash is coming in and getting deposited in the fare deposits, and then also the counts from the cards itself. So there's just a lot of different
Can I
information.
jump in real
before
quick?
we get that. Yeah, go for it.
So right now we base everything on the driver counts, and then we use the other fare payment methods to do a sanity check on the driver counts to see if it's within reason. We generally come up with more scans and more fares being deposited than there are riders on the bus. So either people are coming and putting a bunch of extra money in our fare box, or there's people somehow getting missed.
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to back up what Greg said, that, this sounds great, and I know we need to get accurate ridership counts, but to add another 100,000 to this budget without identifying some specific savings or funding source to help pay for it, we're already showing a net income loss of almost $200,000 for next year. So to add another 100,000 to that right off the top, I can't see unless we can find a way to save a lot of that money somehow.
Could you speak again, Amy, could you speak again to if we have better passenger counts, how confident do you feel that that's going to equal better access to grant funding for us?
I would probably say 98%. The stronger counts that we have, the easier it is for us to go to state and federal funding sources and say, this is why this is important. We need help funding this.
So I think, Daryl, in answer to your concern there, we can't really count on the revenues increasing without that being able to count on the grant funding. And it sounds like we need better accounts in order to get those grants.
Well, I agree, but let's identify how we're going to come up with the money. I mean, I'd like to see more than just a guess as to what it could do. Because I don't want to just add another 100,000 to the budget for next year and be showing an almost $300,000 deficit
Well-
next year with a whole bunch of other line items that I think are very questionable too. You know, we don't know how those will turn out. And I just feel like we have to show how that money's going to be saved in a very short period of time.
So I want to, I just want to take a small bit of issue with you on a deficit, because I feel a little bit, I see it maybe a little bit different from you than you do. So if you look at our supplemental budget and you look at the proposed budget in terms of unencumbered reserve funds, we are very similar in terms of the supplemental and the proposed budget. And then if you go down all the way down to the project available funds or unencumbered reserve funds for the following year, again, the similarities are very similar. Where we're seeing the decrease is in the STIF dedicated project funds. And those were funds that we had to carry over. And it's a little like getting a loan, to repair your, maybe that isn't a good example, but where you're getting a loan for a specific dollar amount and for whatever reason you couldn't spend it on that specific thing that year. These funds have to be spent, and they have to be spent in this particular way on this particular in this particular way. And so while it is an overall decrease in our total reserve funds, the unencumbered reserve funds are still remaining relatively secure. So
Well, yeah, I had a question about how you came up with that number and that was my actual final question, but I look at the numbers there and I see projected available funds at the end of the year, and to come up with the number that you have for next year's budget, it would require that, I'm trying to remember how I came up with it, but I think it would require that the 165,000 that you're showing as roll forward for STIF funds, that's going to actually pay for some of these expenses up above. Is that what you're saying it will do?
that's what I'm saying. We rolled forward some things that we couldn't spend the money on during COVID. And so now we can spend the money in that way on those COVID expenses, on those, on those particular expenses.
Mhm.
And go ahead.
And just to be specific, one of those things that it'll be paying for is the sidewalk improvement, the one-time cost.
So I guess you guys have kind of lost me in a couple of points, and I want to try to clarify if I could. So top down, the unencumbered funds, those are unallocated funds, almost like a rainy day fund, correct?
Correct.
Not covering buses or new buses, not covering new sidewalk repair, office improvements, et cetera, correct?
Correct. Those are reserve funds. And one topic that did get brought up last year was just kind of a question to the board of what is the appropriate amount to be keeping in our reserve funds as we are a public agency.
And I that's kind of the root of my question. I just distinctly remember those conversations. I think the person that was instigating that conversation no longer on the board, but I don't disagree with some of those comments. And then the question about, and I had to step away quickly, but providing or getting in a more accurate pass count or user count, you said would almost 99% guarantee a higher grant allocation. Would it be for the grants to then do the work to actually make those counts or get the equipment or whatever it is to get those counts accurate, or is it just for anything?
I think for anything, and now I'm kind of scared about saying that so unequivocally, but I really do think having those higher counts or more, saying like, yes, these are our accurate counts, would help us go to the state and to federal funding sources and be like, hey, this is really needed. Look at the ridership. This is strong. We need this in our community. Whether they're existing services or if we need to expand our services. So it wouldn't be necessarily for the equipment to do the counting, but actually to provide services. Does that help?
Yeah, and I guess I'm with everybody on this. Like, I wouldn't spend $100,000 just to know have a better head count. Like, unless if you feel confident you guys experienced it, the $100,000. I guess I'm using a little bit of just like transitory theory. Like, if you have $1.2 million unencumbered funds, $100,000 of that is not misappropriated if it's spent on an activity that therefore pays for itself through a high confidence level to make it back.
Yeah,
seems straightforward to me, but unless I missed a comment somewhere in there.
so I think something that that's totally doable is we could create an estimation of how much we think this could potentially save us. Now, of course, it's not going to be perfect, but we can create an estimation, and we can bring that to the next budget committee meeting if that would help.
That would help, yes.
Okay. And then if there,
This is Bridget. I'm on more concerned about the other end is, can you give me any figure at all if we spend 100,000 so that we can carefully count our riders accurately, sorry, I know you're being careful, but accurately, then potentially, does that mean we could receive at least 100,000 a year in the future in support of additional grant money? And if so, why? How do you know that?
okay.
I mean, I hate to make it so simple, but I'd like to be able to explain why the 100,000 is useful. And
I think the way that Bridget explained it, I agree with. I understand that, Bridget.
okay, gotcha. So that's actually more important to me than saving, a minuscule amount of staff time.
Well, and I think you could look at it as both would, contribute to that return, right? So if we're saving staff time and recouping costs maybe in different ways, but then also receiving more money because of it, then I think those could, they speak to the same goal.
Yeah, I do need to yield to Daryl on this, because if you can come up with, okay, this might save us 20,000 a year, then in 5 years, I've paid for it, I guess.
So the other thing that accurate ridership counts can do for the agency is to make our services more efficient. Gives us very specific information on where riders are getting on and off the bus. It gives us specific information on when they're using the bus, and allows us to look at when, how to run the service. So do we, to your point, if you want service later in the evening, does it warrant? Are we getting enough people who are getting on the bus later in the evening for us to warrant providing that service? Are there portions of the day where we could cut back on service? Are there so it offers a glimpse about ridership that can be very informative for existing and future planning. So those are all costs that could be offset. It's somewhat onerous and burdensome to get those numbers on an annual basis from the current way we track riders and on and offs and whatnot. So there are some other ways that this type of technology can help generally. I'm not saying it's a be all end all, but I am saying that there are some advantages overall, and certainly with the Fare Integration Project. And again, I think that'll come out of the demo this year, is we potentially can also see a significant revenue, fare revenue increase from folks that are using a credit card and having the opportunity to use a credit card instead of having to use cash or otherwise. So those are also some additional things that I'm sure Amy will put in her review.
All right, so then just to summarize, so I will create just a document that, to the best of my ability, estimates how much we could potentially save, how much more we could potentially earn based on future grants having more ridership numbers, and then also kind of those external costs, like Patty was talking about, that could be included. Does that sound about right?
That would be good. Thank you.
Okay. So then the next question is, so we have a total of 3 budget committee meetings, including this one scheduled. So actually, I'm sorry, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Is there anything else on the LB20 that you guys have questions on? Okay. So then we had 3 budget committee meetings, including the one today. The next one that is scheduled for the 26th, we kind of had that on there for additional deliberation and discussion as needed. We can cancel that one if you think that we can do the deliberation and discussion needed at the June 2nd meeting, which is when we also take public comment. And then the actual public hearing will be on June 15th. Thoughts on if you would like to keep that the May 26th meeting to discuss this more thoroughly, or if you think we can do it at the June 2nd meeting.
I think we could do it at the June 2nd meeting.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. All right, I will go ahead and cancel that May 26th meeting then.
Okay.
All right, and we'll update it on your calendars and our website. Any other questions? All right, Patty, anything else we need to discuss or bring up?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, well, we are only 4 minutes over, but then I will ask for our chairperson, Jeremy Hole, to go ahead and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
This is Bridget. I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jeremy.
Thank you
good
so
job,
much.
Amy. Thank you.
Good job, Amy.
Thank you.
Great job. Great materials. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
You did good. I will